Australians became more trusting of CEOs, more engaged in local news and less trusting of social media in 2018. This was a 33,000-person survey that's watched very closely. It covers 27 countries, and it showed Australians' trust in social media is less than any other country in the world. Our trust in government still pretty low, especially when it comes to the federal politicians. But business confidence, in terms of our confidence in our leaders locally, actually ticked higher.
Yeah, an intriguing, possibly counterintuitive finding there, given the revelations from the Royal Commission this year. Well, for tonight's Taking Stock, we're joined by Napoleon Purtis, founder of his namesake company, and Tim Guest, Managing Director of Infinite Wealth. Thank you both for being with us for the chat. Yeah, are you surprised to see that trust in CEOs is up and our trust in social media is lower than anywhere else? Napoleon?
You know, CEOs have so many shackles to them and so many people looking over them, you know, from government bodies to all sorts of things, that it doesn't surprise me that there's actually more trust, because they have to be more accountable. And even just kind of walking the streets with all the CCTV cameras and everything, that it actually makes, you know, a CEO and realise how much more accountable he has to be. So therefore, they have an onus and also responsibility to. So it doesn't surprise me that the public has seen that and identified that, you know, as opposed to government that can sometimes, well, I kind of feel sometimes can use alternative facts to kind of sway in their way, and hence a lack of confidence, you know, in governments globally. So I think, you know, helping CEOs to actually take on that leadership role and really shaping some of the debates and some of the nation's issues, I think is a good thing, because they come from a position of enormous amount of responsibility, you know, an enormous amount of people and institutions looking over them all the time.
And experience. I do find, you know, if you're going to compare politicians and business leaders, the reason I love, you know, this show and the fact that we get to speak to business leaders and business people is that they operate in the real world under real person's constraints. And, you know, obviously there's extras, as you said, if you're a CEO, but there's just that disconnect with the politicians more than ever, you know, I think we feel at the moment.
Yeah, I think also, I think it's probably intelligent and to some extent intentional. I mean, nowadays what a lot of people are facing is being in the workforce potentially for around about 50 years. And if they feel like they're just doing a job where the CEO, the leader of that organisation, doesn't have a real care for what's happening in society, then, you know, there's a lack of purpose for the employees. And, you know, people with purpose and they feel like they're connected to their organisations and what they're standing for. I mean, Alan Joyce with Qantas and the marriage equality debate is a perfect example. I think it makes for better workplaces, it makes for greater productivity, it makes for more engaged employees and better results for the economy overall.
Yeah, I thought it was particularly interesting that CEO trust went up, social media trust goes down, because one of the main channels now to communicate is, of course, social media for CEOs as well. So do you think that this casts a shadow on whether or not CEOs should be using social media to get their message across, if there is a trust issue there?
Surely so how difficult it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think this is actually really great, the diminishing of the trust in social media. I think what it's pointing to is how well educated we are as a country. Like, we know, we understand that social media is not the real world. You know, it's our, you know, I mean, I only ever put a photo up if it looks good. You know, I don't put up necessarily the real photos like we all do, right? And I think we're just more aware of the so-called fake news that's out there, and hence we're less likely to trust the new news that's necessarily been put in front of us.
And recently, I mean, it's only been this sort of last year that governments have decided to take action to make social media a lot more accountable. Like, I think that you need to make these people that are so-called influencers accountable for where they're getting paid from, how they're getting endorsed, you know, and because, you know, there's been such a huge following on some things, and they're influencing young people that actually haven't had the traditional media sort of been brought up on to judge it, and they kind of believe it. So I actually feel that we're losing tracks. We're much more educated as a country, and it makes sense because we need to keep pushing the boundary on regulating social media and people revealing, you know, where they're getting funded from or what they're getting to kind of push the boundary, and also to show the reality. Like, you know, I've just done a whole heap of shooting in relation to, you know, I wanted to add more multicultural skin, more Asian skin. I wanted to add texture and tone and age, you know, within there as well. And I said to the I don't want editing. I want editing. I don't want photoshopping. I don't want it, you know, blurred. You know, so you'll see, like when you go into my Instagram, you'll see the skin a lot more real. I don't really believe from my perspective of beauty that, you know, the way that it's been going, where they've just been, you know, these Insta sort of, you know, stars that are kind of manipulating their faces to kind of then get influence is actually fair. And that's happening across many different industries. And we've only just started to see the regulation for the last year. So, but people are realising, hey, that's not really as authentic as I thought, you know?
Yeah, but have you lost out because you've taken that authentic approach? I mean, in some ways, like the...
I think it's what the market wants. I think people want, and it's, you know, as much as a bad rap that social media gets, I think there's a lot of really positive thing that comes out of it as well. And I think it's, you know, I'm certainly noticing, you know, maybe more so with the small to medium enterprises, like the way that they're trying to communicate with their customers nowadays is through authenticity and what's really real. So I think it's what people want.
So even if it hasn't, you know, worked through periods, you think we're in a good stage now? Where
I think it's an ebb and flow.
Yeah.
And it'll get better. I think governments are regulating, you know, Europe has shown with the GDPR laws how important it is, you know, to kind of like get permission. I think, you know, all those things that happen with Facebook in the USA being held accountable for people's data and things. So I think we're getting better and better. And I agree with Tim, like, it does ebb and flow, but for me, I think there just continually needs to be a purpose in making sure social media becomes a lot more accountable and a lot more authentic.
Right, so this is kind of a perception that is national, international. Obviously, these issues are particularly focused on a certain group. So, to our next topic, a photographer, this is a recent news story, a photographer asked teenagers to edit their photos until they thought that they looked social media ready. Yeah. The level of editing has taken many people by surprise. So, we've got a few pictures of the before and afters. And I suppose the question is, what strikes you about how teens are changing their appearance for social media? And I guess, is it all pretty harmful stuff?
Goes a little to your point that you were just talking about. So it was kind of a project that they did, right?
Exactly.
So they were saying, you know, here's 5 minutes, here's your photo, just get it ready for social media. And despite being so beautiful, those girls, and admitting that, you know, actually they kind of really liked the first photo, they all edited these photos to the max so that they kind of seem to like imitate, you know, Hollywood movie stars or... Yeah, what do we take away from this? Well,
this irritates me enormously. I have teenage daughters and I'm very, very strict, you know, about what they do, you know, in relation to their face. Like, they're not maybe because I'm their dad and I think that they're beautiful, but they're just beautiful. So this irritates me a lot because there is this kind of sort of subliminal push, you know, to try and do this and make it all, you know, friendly for social media to get the following and for my friends to like me and all that. And that's when also the bullying starts, and this sort of faking it away creates enormous other repercussions of bullying, insecurities, you know, body insecurities, like, you know, personality insecurities, like all of that. And it's particularly irritating to me. Like, I just say to them, like, don't post. And now I can't do it to my oldest as much, even though I try and intrude. But with my youngest ones, I say to them, can you show me before you put that? And if I don't like a photo, I make them take it down. Because if it's not real, and if it's not, you know, capturing just a moment that they want to share that was fun for their friends or, you know, their network, then why go to that trouble? You know what I mean? Like, they're not selling anything, so why? And in the days before, we used to ring our friends and kind of have this excitement about telling them, you know, that, oh my God, I had my makeup done, I went and got shopping, and I put this beautiful dress on. Now they kind of manipulate it all, but the whole process is lost. So therefore, the interaction, even the human connection, is lost as well. So I get very annoyed at these sort of things, and having teenage girls, I know the force that it actually has. Yes, yeah, very much.
I think the thing we've got to be a little bit careful, though, it's quite easy to kind of point to social media as maybe the problem, but I think the reality is even if you took away that technology, we've still got those levels of anxiety and depression and, you know, the pressure that society places on us. And
but it's just amplified it.
Because it's so much. I mean, nowadays you can download an app and, you know, to be honest, I don't know how they work, but you
like touch of the button stuff. Right? These filters are not like, you know, some special program. It's literally like filter, filter, filter.
We didn't have access to that kind of stuff, you know, many, many years ago, but I think it's just amplifies an issue that we've already got in society. I mean, you look at the suicide rate. I mean, we live in one of the greatest countries in the world, yet we have, you know, really alarming suicide statistics, 8 people a day. You know, so I think it speaks to a more underlying issue that probably we need to be looking at as a society rather than, I think there's some great things that come with social media, and there's some negative things. I think it's only going to amplify what's already there.
Pessimistically, though, does this just get worse and worse as everybody ends up on social media?
I actually think, and this is what in terms of the fake news, like we've had social media around for 10 years now, which really is not a long time at all. And particularly for us as a creature, a human being, to learn to adapt and evolve to utilise it, you know, it starts off and we start to see, you know, now everyone's got their soapbox that they can espouse their views from. And, you know, going back to the last story about trust, one of the things that we actually also saw is that we saw an increase in trust from local news sources.
Yes.
And I think what you'll tend to find is there's ebbs and flows. So you get a lot more of the fake news, but then people start to distinguish that they can't really trust stuff, and then they have a craving for sources that they can actually go for. So
sure.
we could find that it starts to move in the other direction.
Yeah, I'm not anti-technology at all. I mean, I think
can't be in this world, can you? Yeah.
I just think that we just need to get to a position where we're making influencers and bloggers more accountable and authentic. And I think there is a movement happening around that. I think, you know, regulation has been, you know, slower to start around that, but it is starting. And at the end of the day, there is a freedom with social media that you can express your opinion. For me, it's just making sure that it comes from a position of authenticity. And these greater issues that our society has, you know, whatever the media channel is that Tim referred to, you know, will still exist. So maybe it is about actually incorporating social media into more human activity as well. Because when people aren't bored and they're involved with a lot more, then, you know, there's just a sense of support as well. And societies that have a lot of that sort of support, even though they still are technologically advanced, you know, don't have, you know, those sort of rates that you were talking about in terms of suicide and stuff like that. So I think us being more responsible with accountability and still allowing technology to take effect is actually a good path.
I do like what you said. It starts from the ground up too, right? You know, responsibility in our own backyard and kind of having these messages out there too. Now, the 1% is the most common reference point when we talk about income inequality. It comes up in news articles all the time. But the bar for entry into the 1% from an annual income perspective varies greatly around the world, which is quite interesting. In India, for example, it's about $112,000 a year gets you into the club. China, $146,000. Australia's threshold's about $239,000 or around 333,000 Australian dollars if we convert that. And in the US, if you convert that, it's $666,000. So you can see where we sit in the scheme of things. Does this surprise you guys?
I was quite actually buoyed by these results. I was, you know, particularly if I guess you look at maybe the inherited culture in the US, it's a land of opportunity. We tend to find there's a lot less regulation. You know, they're more supportive of people being entrepreneurs. So to see that to be in the 1% in Australia was half of what it was in the US, I think what it pointed to me is that, you know, we probably have a pretty good balance going on in here in this country, which we do give people the opportunity to, you know, be ambitious and produce while, you know, not doing it in a way that may be considered grossly unfair. I mean, not to say that there's things that can't be.
I personally am very untrusting of statistics, and I don't think we know who the 1% really are, you know, because it's not just about the income and what you can buy from it, it's about the power they yield as well. And I don't think we know who they are. You know, as going around to my stores and just meeting people, Australia's a great egalitarian country where, you know, dreams can be seen and made, but at the end of the day there's a lot of suffering as well. And I don't think we know who those people that control those levers really are. And if someone's earning that amount of money, they may have a lot more sort of disposable income, a lot more sort of what's known as freedom. But ultimately, I really have never sort of met these 1% people, because I've just met everyone that I've met that sort of earns even more or less or whatever money it is actually hard workers and battlers that kind of are trying to achieve a good standard of living that thankfully our country, Australia, is one of the best at doing that. And for me, I don't want to even know about who those 1%. I just want to be able to make sure that constantly there is an upward mobility for people to just have a bit more of what they want and have more freedom around them. So I'm very untrusting of statistics, and having lived in America for 11 years as well, you know, that 1%, I don't think that even billionaires over there get to have access to it. I think it's like private meetings and very, very small club
Yeah.
and we don't really know it. So
We'll never
these
meet 'em, you
statistics,
reckon?
these statistics are kind of, I don't really know what they're trying to say other than, we live in a country that I just think we need to embrace our battler sort of instinct and our instinct to try and do more and make our country greater, because this 1%, what does it really mean? For me, I don't know what it means.
We'll never meet
at
him, who
all.
cares?
Good
Hey,
bit of
Napoleon,
context as
thank
well
you.
is that you live in Australia, globally you're in the 1%.
Well,
Yeah,
that's very
good point.
true.
Good point.
Good
Hey,
context
Napoleon,
to
Tim,
have,
thank you very much for both
Thank you.
joining us
Very
for
welcome.
those
Thanks,
issues
Jeff.
tonight.